everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today we are talking about one of my favorite things, which is how to choose the right POV for your story. The POV you choose basically impacts the style of your book and how you are communicating information to readers, and this impacts tension. Having good dramatic tension is essential to telling a good story, and making the right choice of POV, which is both how you tell the story, and I'm going to go into the details of that, but also who you choose to tell the story through, can make a huge impact in how your book works or doesn't work with readers. So often I'll tell you when I see an aspiring writer with a book and, they're having trouble and they're just not hooking readers or agents are saying no, very often they're telling it from the wrong POV. Now, it can be devastating and frustrating to realize after you have a book that you told it the wrong way. And if, you are married to the story that you're trying to tell, sometimes you have to start over and try it from a different perspective. But hopefully you will watch this and I will give you all of my ideas and tips and you will choose the correct or best, there's no right or wrong. It's really kind of like best versus less good POV in which and from which to tell your story. Most commonly, you're going to tell a story from a limited POV, a limited perspective, usually from one character's point of view. This means that the reader is going to experience the story from the point of view of your main character and discover things and experience things as your character learns and experiences them as well. Most YA is told from this limited point of view, which is why YA has such a sense of immediacy. You're there with the point of view character. Now, this doesn't mean that there's only one point of view character. You can have multiple points of view. Their perspectives just need to be limited. Compare and contrast this with omniscient point of view. This is where a narrator, a third-party narrator who knows everything, is telling the story. Basically, an omniscient point of view, the story and information is presented from multiple angles and levels of knowledge without the limitation of a single character or viewpoint. So sometimes when you have more than one character, multi-POV, this kind of falls into the omniscient territory because especially if you have multiple characters who know things that other characters don't know, it kind of falls into this arena because you're presenting the reader with all the different sides, so they're getting all of the information. And depending on how you tell those multiple POVs, you can really kill your attention or you can build on it. It depends on execution. Whereas, again, limited POV, I'd say you can get away with limited POV if your multiple characters don't know everything, especially things that are kind of happening outside of them and the story. So POV really just has to do with how you, the writer, choose to give information and reveal things to your reader. To give you an example, imagine my perennial favorite example, The Hunger Games. Imagine The Hunger Games if it wasn't told first person from Katniss's point of view. Imagine if it was told in third person from more of an omniscient point of view, where the narrator would tell you everything. You would get meanwhile in the Capitol, President Snow sat on his throne and, watched her with contempt, whatever it might be. Essentially, movies are omniscient POV because they're going to show you a lot of things from different perspectives and things that are happening that your main character couldn't possibly know. It's still an interesting story, but I would argue without the limited POV of Katniss and the way in which information was gradually revealed to us, the reader, you wouldn't have the same emotional experience. It would still be an interesting story and a story well told. It would just be different. Now back to limited POV, which is the one I'm mostly going to be focusing on because most of the time we're going to be writing in limited POV. And again, I'm going to use The Hunger Games as an example to illustrate that it is very important who your limited point of view character is. Imagine The Hunger Games if Katniss weren't the main character, if it weren't her limited perspective, if instead the story was told from the point of view of a District 1 tribute. It's a different book because it's a different character who is experiencing the world differently and also has a different level of knowledge of what life in the Capitol is like and kind of different forms of weaponry and brutality and killing. They would approach the games with a very different strategy because they would have trained their whole life for the Hunger Games and would have volunteered to be in it for a very different reason from why Katniss volunteered. It's a different book. And of course, if you choose the point of view of a District 1 tribute, I mean, what? They'd be difficult to root for, and why would you care? Or to use an example from a recent movie that I really, really love. And I actually got the idea to do this video about POV in novels because I watched an amazing video on YouTube. I'm going to link to it down below. I mean, you should watch all the videos on this channel. And that is Lessons from the Screenplay. This amazing channel takes movies and dissects them to talk about storycraft. And they did a fantastic video on Ex Machina, and it plays into this very subject, which is the way that you choose to tell your story and through whose perspective to tell the story really impacts your story. Now, I'm not going to get into spoilers. The video Lesson from the Screenplay does, so if you either want the spoilers or you've seen it, you can actually watch that video, but I'm going to vaguely say here, and if you have seen the movie, you'll get this. Imagine Ex Machina not from Caleb's point of view, but from Ava's point of view. That is a very different movie. It is tonally different, the tension is completely different, and kind of how you feel about the various characters would also be different, but mostly for the purposes of this discussion. It changes the tension and the tone. Tension is essentially pacing, or tension ties into pacing. And if you watched my pacing video, starting your story in the right place, I talk about tension a lot. And that's because stories that lack tension, lack conflict and stakes, another video where I mention this, stories that lack tension, you tend to not care about what's happening, and you will lose motivation to read and find out what's happening if you don't have enough dramatic tension. Tension doesn't always have to be like, oh, it's a thriller, so like you're tense because someone's gonna jump out with a knife. There's all sorts of different kinds of tension. There's romantic tension, there's emotional tension, there's character tension, there is mystery or thriller tension that you can use. Plot twist tie-in to tension. You need good tension to get people to read your story, and tension is tied directly to, again, the point of view that you choose. Sometimes it's a better choice, like, I don't think, at least if we're thinking in the extremes of the Hunger Games, I don't think we would want to read the Hunger Games from the perspective of a District 1 tribute. Not for the story that we got and the trajectory and emotional journey that we got from the Hunger Games. But you might still want to read the Hunger Games from Peeta's perspective. That would still be a really interesting book. Again, a very different book, but would still have a decent amount of dramatic and character and story tension. It'd still be very readable, but it does change the tone of the book in a lot of ways. And so that's kind of how you have to think of it in terms of choosing through whom you are going to tell your story. Now, I kind of mentioned multi-point of view before, how often, but not always, multi-POV is going to be more of an omniscient narrator situation or omniscient POV situation. But that, I said, you can still pull off limited POV with multi or dual point of view stories. But I do want to say that I've seen a trend lately because, as you know, because of Author Mentor Match, I've read a lot of queries and sample pages for books that are out there in the trenches, the books that you guys are writing, and I've noticed a massive trend, an uptick in dual POV and multi-POV, and I think it's because we've seen amazing books like Six of Crows, books that do it incredibly, incredibly well. Plus, dual POV, where you alternate between a boy and a girl in YA, can be fantastic for romantic tension. Sometimes it's a really good decision to tell a story through dual or even multi-POV. But I have noticed that a lot of writers are going for this, but it's not the right choice for their story. Dual POV and multi-POV are very difficult to pull off because you are, especially if you're going for limited POV but with multiple POVs, it's hard. It's hard to pull off well maintaining the tension and pacing of your story. Very, very often the advice that I have had for writers, and I've given this to some writers, and bless them, they've actually listened to me and they have rewritten their books, to cut one of the POVs. Generally speaking, when it comes to dual or multi-POV, and I really should do a whole video just on dual and multi-POV because there's so much more in it that is beyond choosing the right POV and tension in this video. So often in these stories, there's one character who is more well-developed, they have a stronger voice, they have a stronger character arc, they have further to go, and their character arc ties into the plot arc, but also telling the story from one specific character's point of view often will have the best tension because of the limited POV trick. The reader will experience the story in a more exciting and engaging way if it's told through character A's point of view instead of character B's point of view. And if you have character A and character B, sometimes character B can detract from the reading experience of following the story through character A. So that's why very often dual POV or multi-POV don't work, because it impacts the reading experience. Now, in addition to all of this of just like who you're telling the story through, there is how you tell the story, which is also POV, not to confuse you. And these are the choices you make from like a prose level, stylistic level of, am I gonna tell it in first person? Am I gonna tell it in third person? I mean, if you really want to, are you gonna tell it in second person? Oh, that one's not used often for a reason. But first person, third person, most common. And then, do you want to tell it in present tense or past tense? These are choices you make that also impact the reading experience. Now, first person is most common in YA, and again, this ties into the immediacy of it. When you're following a story from like the literal point of view of a character, you're in their head, I did this, I said this, I do this. No, that's awkward. Well, this brings us into present or past tense. So my personal preference, and it is my preference, I prefer first person past tense if I am reading a book in first person. My favorite tense is actually third person past tense, though it's funny because my books aren't written in it, but it is my favorite to read. I don't know why, but I like first person past tense. First person because of the immediacy, and past tense because past tense is kind of it's an invisible tense almost. Like, I just find that first person and past tense are the least awkward. I do find first person present tense awkward sometimes to read. It can take me as a reader a little while to kind of adjust to it and get used to it. And of course, ironically, my favorite, The Hunger Games, is told in first person present tense. So first person present tense, it lends an amazing immediacy to the reading experience because you are literally experiencing the story with the character. Whereas when you do first person past tense, you're with the character, but past tense kind of, you're still like almost viewing the action from outside by using past tense. So first person present tense has a place, but let me tell you my caveat with choosing to tell a story in first person, but especially choosing to tell a story in first person present tense. I find that this leads to lazy writing. First person is theoretically the easiest to write in because we all experience the world from our own points of view. It's easy to say, well, I think this. I see over there a blue pillow. I'm looking at a blue pillow. It's easy to envision a story from the first person point of view of a character because we are all the first person point of view of our own lives. But I find that when it comes to writers making this choice and tackling this, and it's the novice writers usually, because it's easy, they get into clunky sentence rhythm, repetitive sentence rhythm. There's a lot of defaulting to telling that happens when you write in first person, especially first person present tense. The stories, while they might feel immediate, they don't feel as rich or as detailed. There's more navel gazing, etc. Now this is with novice writers because, again, perennial favorite, I'm gonna pull it right off the shelf. I love this book. I will use it as an example until the end of time, and it is told from first person present tense, and it is one of my favorite books. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. That's beautiful. My fingers stretch out like you're with Katniss doing these things. I love this book till the end of time. So, exceptions to every rule. Of course, you can have the same problem with first person past tense. In general, my advice to any writer who makes the choice to write in first person is you have to work twice as hard to make your writing detailed, rich, to vary your sentence structure and not fall back on, well, my character can see it, so I can just like describe them seeing things all the time or feeling things or touching things. Like that just gets really, really boring. You have to try a lot harder to describe things in interesting ways and make the story feel vivid for the reader. Now let's talk about third person. As I mentioned, third person past tense is my favorite. This is a very, very common point of view for fantasy, I've noticed, including urban fantasy. In fact, some of my favorite YA books are told in third person past tense. I'm going to pull one of those as well. So Truthwitch is a fantastic example of this. It is a YA fantasy that is told in third person past tense. This enables Susan to give us a sense of the world from multiple points of view, though I will say it doesn't feel like an omniscient POV situation. She very smartly chooses POVs that they feel limited when you are in them, and she gradually reveals information. But by doing third person past tense, she can explore a lot of facets of the world, and she can describe and talk about things that aren't necessarily happening from the direct point of view of the character. But I would say that this is a close third. So talking a bit about close third. First person, of course, feels really, really immediate, but that doesn't mean that third person can't feel immediate, and you can accomplish this through doing it very tight or close third person. This means that even though you're using, the character's name, so Sophia said blah, 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 you still use things like internal, thoughts or dialogue or describing or talking about kind of their perspective and how they're feeling and their, kind of how they view the world to get really close to their head. It feels like first person without it being in first person. This isn't easy to pull off, but it is doable, and those are my favorites. I love close third past tense books. Now, briefly, I want to talk about third person present tense. It's not used that often, partly because it can feel kind of awkward and be a bit distancing, but occasionally it is used to fantastic effect. And my favorite recent example is Defy the Stars by Claudia Gray. It particularly well serves Abel, who is an android character, a mech, and the third person present tense, it feels distancing, but in a good way. And then honestly, I just kind of got used to it, so it was fine for Noemi's chapters, but I thought it was a brilliant and perfect choice for Abel. It still kind of had that like epic grand scale that I feel that you get from a third person narration and like showing us the world, but it felt immediate because of the present tense and also kind of had that awkwardness that worked for Abel. So that's an interesting choice that you can make, and that is a choice that the author makes about how to tell the story, and it does impact the way that people read them. So if you're not sure about what POV and tense you're going to write in, I recommend actually trying it multiple ways. Like take your first chapter or even just your first scene and write it in the different possible ways, and then read it or give it to someone else to read and see how they feel about it. Ask them how it impacts the way that they're reading the story. So at the end of the day, you're going to combine kind of the choice you're making of, first person versus third person versus let's not talk about second person, and past tense versus present tense, combined with the actual characters through whom you are going to tell the story, how close you're going to get into their head, and how much you're going to let the reader know. Are you going to let them find stuff out as your character finds it out, or are you going to tell them things that the main character wouldn't necessarily know or see to tell your story? Always think about tension, always think about pacing, and how your reader will experience the story through the POV choices that you are making. I hope this was helpful. It's kind of a big topic because I could have covered kind of the literal what character you choose to tell the story through and the first person, third person tense thing separately, but I really do think that they go together and they're really all the POV through which you choose to tell your story. So I wanted to give you both sides at the same time. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about this, about POV, or about any other craft thing. I'm always looking for ideas to make more videos. If you liked this, Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post 2 to 3 times a week and I talk about craft, the industry, and my publishing experience. I give you like the whole 360 of being a writer, especially one who is pursuing traditional publishing and young adult fiction. Thank you as always for watching, and happy writing, everyone.